Hi and welcome to the Malat cookery channel. So today I'm going to be making a loaf of bread but without the crust. Now these are really popular in the USA using a device called a Pullman loaf tin. So one of the things that puzzled me about these Pullman loaf tins was how much they cost in the USA. The branded ones can be up to $42. I've actually seen one advertised for $46. So one of the things I asked myself was whether you need to spend that much money to create a no crust loaf of bread, or whether you can actually buy one of the really cheap copies and still make a decent loaf. So part of this video is I've purchased off eBay a Pullman loaf tin for £7, which is about $9, and we are going to see whether we can actually make something with it. As usual, a full list of ingredients will be given at the end of the video, so let's have a look at those ingredients now and anything else we're going to need for today. So what we're going to need for today's recipe: 500 grams of bread flour, 3 tablespoons of olive oil, 1 teaspoon of sugar, 1 teaspoon of salt, 14 grams or 2 7-gram sachets of easy bake yeast, 375 milliliters of lukewarm water. We may need slightly more, we may need slightly less, we'll just see how we go, but we want to produce a well hydrated dough. Going to be using a food mixer with a dough hook to get a lot of elasticity into the dough, and also one of these bread tins with a sliding lid on, sometimes called a Pullman loaf tin. The branded ones are very expensive. This is a cheap one off eBay. The only thing with this one is I'm going to have to do some prep work on the surface to stop the dough from actually sticking. So first thing we need to do is to combine all of the dry ingredients together in the mixing bowl to make sure everything is combined evenly. Okay, so once we've done that, we can add in our 3 tablespoons of olive oil. Just take up some of the flour in the spoon to get all of that olive oil out of the spoon. Otherwise your measurement isn't going to be accurate. And the next thing to do is just to work this mixture through with your hand to produce almost like a fine breadcrumb. Okay, so we've added the olive oil now to the flour. The next thing to do is to add the water. So we've got the bowl onto the machine with the dough hook attached. Going to be placing the machine on a middle speed setting, adding the water a little bit at a time, and a good visual indication when you're using a machine to see that we've got the correct hydration is when the dough will stick to the bottom of the bowl on a lower speed setting, but as we move to a higher speed setting, the dough will actually lift off the bottom of the bowl. Once we get to that stage, we don't add any more water, and we leave the machine then on a slightly higher than middle speed setting, and we're going to knead the dough then with the machine for 12 minutes. So once the dough has been in the machine kneading for 12 minutes, I've then taken it from the machine, shaped the dough, placed it into a large bowl which has been lightly oiled with olive oil to stop the dough from sticking. Next thing to do is to cover the bowl with food wrap or cling film, place into a warm part of the house, and leave until the dough doubles in size. So we've got our dough now which has doubled in size. I've also prepped this cheap Pullman loaf tin. So what I've done here is just a light oiling of olive oil on all surfaces, and then a dusting with flour to both the tin and the lid as well. Next thing we need to do is to do a process called knocking back. And all that is just handling the dough so that we take out any really large air bubbles from the dough, because obviously we don't want large air gaps in the loaf itself. And just handling the dough will do this. You don't need to go mad. We don't want to knock all of the air out, just the large bubbles. So the next thing to do, I'm just going to shape the dough. So all we're doing here is just creating a little bit of surface tension on the dough itself. Various ways to do that, but it's not really that important with something like a Pullman loaf tin, because the finished surface is actually going to be the lid. So once we've got our shaped dough, I'm just going to place that into the tin. So next thing I'm going to do with this, use the same piece of food wrap or cling film that we used before. Cover the tin. I'm just going to leave this now to proof for a second time until it comes to within a couple of centimeters of the top of the tin itself. So again, it's going to virtually double in size. Okay, so the dough's risen for the second time. Unfortunately, this is what happens when you get a little bit distracted. So it's risen a little bit too much for my liking. It should be about 2 centimeters below the top of the tin, as I said before. Hopefully we can get the lid on. So the next thing to do is I've preheated the oven to 180 degrees centigrade, 350 degrees Fahrenheit. We're now going to place the tin in the center of the oven, and this should take between 30 and 40 minutes to bake. I'll check it after 30 minutes to see where we are. And once it's fully baked, we'll get it onto a wire rack to cool, and I'll show you the results. Okay, so the loaf has been in the oven for 35 minutes, so I'm hoping it's done. So let's just see if we can get the lid off. Okay. Right, so that's what we've got with regard to this type of loaf. I think making the dough and baking the loaf is the easy bit. We've now got to try and get it out of this bread tin. So we've got our wire rack. It's always best to cool bread, cakes, that type of thing, to cool them down on a wire rack, not on a flat surface, because the underside of the cake or the bread will go sweaty on a flat surface. So let's see if we're in luck. If we can get this out. Well, that was easier than I thought. So this is our no crust loaf. I'm just going to leave that to cool down for about 10 minutes, and then I'll slice it and show you what the inside looks like. So just put a little bit of Irish butter on there. And taste that. Oh, so that is such a soft, light loaf of bread. It just freaks me out when I make this bread and there's no crust on it. So I've proved it. You don't need to spend a lot of money on a Pullman loaf tin to produce a really decent loaf of bread without the crust. Please subscribe to the channel, and as usual, if you've enjoyed this particular video, hit the like button. Thank you very much for watching.